Boba Fett is back, and he's the new daimyo in town. He's looking to build a criminal empire, but can't do it alone. In a recent video of the Book of Boba Fett, we got to see how his two Gamorrean bodyguards faced off against more assassins trying to smother his empire before it even begins. They had already proven themselves capable and loyal, rescuing Fett and Fennec Shan from the Night Wind by hanging back and attacking just at the right moment. While Gamorreans are often presented as dumb beyond imagination, those of you who've been watching the Book of Boba Fett probably know by now that this wasn't accurate and that there was more to them than met the eye. In this video, we're going to be talking about why the Gamorrean guards had a lot more depth than most Star Wars fans give them credit for.
Attention, Sergeant on deck!
Gamorreans came from the planet Gamorre, located in the Outer Rim. Gamorre was a lush planet filled with a variety of environments, from deep forests to mountain ranges to frozen tundras. According to legends, it had a population of 500 million primitive Gamorreans. It was considered quite pleasant by most Offworlders, except for the fact that the Gamorreans were always at war. In fact, if you looked up Gamorre on your travel guide, you would find a single line saying, "Do not visit Gamorre." The Gamorreans were a primitive species, constantly fighting with each other and maintaining no real contact or trade with Offworlders. They were organized into clans, each of which led by a female serving as the clan matron and a male serving as the warlord. Possessing a relatively low intelligence, Gamorreans did not actively develop hyperspace or interplanetary technology, relying instead on the Hutts and other crime syndicates who recruited them as mercenaries and workers because of their physical strength and violent nature. Standing at just under 2 meters tall and weighing over 100 kilograms, Gamorreans were your typical brawn over brains kind of species. They're the equivalent of that huge bouncer at the door to the hottest club in your area, except they're even uglier. Sometimes referred to as pig lizards, Gamorreans were distinguished by their green skin color and porcine features, such as their upturned snouts and fangs that resembled real-life warthogs. Just like in our world, the females were called sows, while the males were referred to as boars. The boars in Gamorrean society were divided into 4 classes: warlords, clan boars, tuskers, and veterans. The warlord was the leader of the clan and was married to the clan matron. They ruled with absolute power over all matters of war and acted as the general for the clan army, with lesser warlords serving as clan captains. Clan boars usually had better weapons and armor made by their sows. Tuskers were unmarried boars and made up the bulk of the clan army, surviving on the spoils of war. Veterans, on the other hand, were retired from war due to injury, disease, or old age, and could usually be differentiated by their missing limbs. This class system showed how Spartan the way of life was for these boars. Their lives were best summarized as brutish. Gamorreans also had terrible eyesight and a distaste for ranged weapons, believing that close combat was the true measure of a Gamorrean's bornness. While usually depicted as stout, some of them were thin and slightly taller, although having a potbelly was a more desirable appearance among Gamorreans. They were often considered to be extremely dumb creatures, though they were seen as good fighters and were employed as guards and enforcers. In the first episode of the Book of Boba Fett, Torture Droid 8D8 presented 2 Gamorrean guards who had been loyal to Bib Fortuna and had previously served Jabba. Fennec initially wanted them executed, but Fett had different plans. He offered to spare their lives in exchange for showing him the same loyalty as they had shown their bosses before them. The Gamorreans readily agreed. Fennec questioned if it was a wise decision, since they could not be certain of their true loyalty, but Fett was probably right in choosing to keep them around. Any crime lord worth their salt knew they had to have someone watching their back at all times. The Hutts, and Jabba in particular, liked to hire Gamorreans since they were relatively cheap and were so dumb they wouldn't be susceptible to bribery. In Legends, Jabba on one occasion even hired Han Solo and Chewbacca to bring 12 Gamorreans to Tatooine to be pledged into servitude. Gamorrean culture dictated that they would only serve a master who was strong enough to beat them in combat, so Jabba agreed to fight all 12 of them at once on the condition that they were blindfolded. Being an absolute scumbag, Jabba then ordered his thugs to beat up the Gamorreans, killing 4 of them in the process. The surviving Gamorreans pledged their loyalty to Jabba, thinking it was he who had beaten them to a pulp. These Gamorreans would keep their loyalty to Jabba, protecting him and meting out justice to those who dared oppose him. Similarly, when Fett and Shan were surrounded by the Night Wind, the Gamorreans bravely charged the assassins, easily taking them down with their superior size and strength. While they certainly could have left Fett to his own fate, they stayed true to their pledge of loyalty, earning them a permanent spot in Fett's growing crime family. Gamorrean combat was tied directly with their notions of honor. The honorable way to fight for a Gamorrean was to go face to face with an opponent for death or defeat. While often combat was to the death, sometimes Gamorreans would fight to see who could draw first blood if they did not wish to risk their life over a show of strength. The use of magic, or as we know it, the Force or advanced technology, was frowned upon by Gamorreans, and sneaking up on an enemy was also considered dishonorable. Gamorreans favored melee weapons such as vibro axes and war armor called mukgufa. This was plate battle armor that was molded by the warrior from scraps found on the battlefield and bound together with leather straps, with a helmet that accommodated their horns. Thinner plates could be attached to their arms or waist to allow for maximum mobility. With all this emphasis on combat and war, many considered Gamorreans to be nothing more than mindless brutes who couldn't even speak. However, this wasn't necessarily true. The Gamorreans spoke their own native tongue of Gamorrese or Gamorrean, which to a non-speaker sounded like a string of meaningless squeals, grunts, and oinks. This language was complex enough to serve their needs, and while most males could not read or write, they did have basic runes that the Sows would use for keeping track of their complex lineage. The perception that Gamorreans were incapable of intelligent thought because they could not speak had more to do with their vocal cords than their brains. Their physiology made it impossible for them to speak anything but their native tongue, even though most of them could understand Galactic Basic. Gamorrean names, in fact, were generally a description of what they would do if someone made them angry. But most members of other species never understood this and did not assign any meaning to these grunts and squeals. In episode 3 of the Book of Boba Fett, we got to see how the Gamorrean guards weren't afraid to take on a foe twice their size. Despite getting slammed by the Wookiee Black Chrysanthemum, the Gamorreans held their own, leading Chrysanthemum away from Fett into the throne room right above the Rancor pit. These Gamorreans, at least, weren't as dumb as they might have looked on the outside. So that's some of the rich history and culture that made the Gamorrean guards a lot more complex than the simple-minded creatures many take them to be. But what do you think? Did Boba Fett make the right decision keeping them around? Let us know all that and how you're enjoying the Book of Boba Fett in the comment section below. And as always guys, thank you so much for watching and I hope to see you in the next video.